Hey guys, it's Ariel. Ooh, look at that little shiny thingamabob. Oh, hey guys, welcome back. It's Jen, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this gorgeous mystical mermaid cake. This is a great cake for a kid or adult birthday party. For those adults who still love mermaids. I mean, why wouldn't you? They're magical, mystical, and they live under the sea. This cake is especially magical because of the shiny gold, and the purple and teal are always a great combo for a mermaid cake. And it's actually really easy to make. And we have to show our mermaids some support. They've been fighting for the title from the unicorn cake for centuries. And they never win it. Never! Here's a list of the tools I used if you want to take a quick screenshot of this. So first we're going to start with making the mermaid tail cake topper because that takes the longest to dry. And you could do this up to a month in advance. Once it's totally dry, you can wrap it in plastic wrap and put it in an airtight container. So first we're going to color our fondant. Take out a little ball of fondant enough to fill in your mold. It's better to have too much than too little. And then take a really teeny piece of that fondant and mix in some teal colored icing color to color that ball to the same color that is on the bottle. And slowly mix in that dark teal with our white to get the desired color. The reason why we color it this way is because it's much easier to mix fondant together than to mix icing color with fondant. The fondant will soften up as you mix it. If your fondant's sticking to your hands or starts to dry up, just rub a little vegetable shortening on your hands like lotion. Next, dust your mold with cornstarch. I don't want too much, so I flip it over and shake some out. Then roll your fondant into a ball and put it in the biggest section of your mold. Spread it throughout your mold, keeping everything in one piece. We do this to keep the mold strong, especially at that weak point where the narrow part under the fin has to hold up all that weight of the fin. And then scrape all the excess fondant off. And then you're going to switch directions and push your fondant inward from the edge of the mold. You do this so we don't have to trim off any excess fondant, and it makes it easier to get it out. And just turn it upside down and simply peel it out of your mold. And peel out the most delicate side first. Now quickly make another mermaid tail mold because we're going to make this cake topper 3D because we want the back of our cake to look amazing too. So you're going to want to put the first mold upside down onto your piece of foam. We use the foam because it'll dry faster, but also it won't smush those delicate imprints. Then put a piece of parchment paper over that. Flip your second mermaid tail on top of that. We're doing this so we can match up the shape. And once you feel like they're matched up well, you're going to carefully transfer the second tail off of the first tail so they can both dry separately. I want to have them dry separately because if they're put together now, it's going to take so much longer for them to dry and they're way more likely to break. Let these dry at least overnight depending on the humidity where you live. We'll come back to finishing this after we make our other molds. It's really the same thing here with the other molds. Dust it with cornstarch, shake it out, fill in the molds with fondant. We really want to make sure we fill every crevice because these are such delicate molds. We want to make sure the little pieces are strong as they can be. And then scrape it all off. And we're going to reverse directions like we did before, pushing the fondant now away from the edge of the mold so it's easier to get out. What is most different about these molds is this mold is less flexible. So instead of peeling it out, you're going to slap it against the countertop violently. See what comes out, and whatever doesn't, you just keep slapping it harder and harder until the most stubborn piece comes out. And you're going to want to make some in violet as well, and also white for the ones we want to paint gold. And just make as many of each color as you want. Just keep in mind that we're going to decorate the back and the sides of the cake too. Leave those out to dry with your mermaid tail. They're going to dry a lot faster because they're not as thick. Okay, and when those are all dry, we're gonna paint them gold. This is a pretty simple technique. It's really more about knowing which product to use. So I highly recommend TMP Super Gold Dust. It's gorgeous. It actually looks like real gold. I like to mix my gold dust with Everclear, which is 190 proof grain alcohol. I like to use that just because it dries really fast, but you can use vodka. You could also use lemon extract, and if you don't want any alcohol at all, you can use vegetable oil. And just mix it until it's liquidy, but you don't want it too runny. Just start with a really small amount. This gold dust is technically non-toxic. An example of something else that's non-toxic is kids' paint, because sometimes kids eat paint. So if you want something that's edible, I found Wilton's metallic cake paint set to be the closest in quality to this dust. It's a little bit darker, it's a little less shiny, but it's still really beautiful. This set also comes with copper, so I like to do the first coat in gold and the second coat in copper to give it lighten it up a little bit and give it a little more shine. Just make sure you mix that cake paint really well before you use it. And you see those little round discs? Those are actually white candy melts, and we're going to use those for the oysters. And I like to paint the back of them first and then the front. Paint the two pieces of mermaid tails before you put them together, because after you put them together, there'll be even more weight on that weak point that has to hold up the fin. So it'll be even more likely to break. I like to paint the edges of the tail first because it gives it definition against whatever backdrop. Then I'm just going to scarcely paint it. Make sure you don't have too much paint on your brush. And then when you do the scales, really make sure there's not a lot of paint on your brush so you can control how much you put and where. So if you paint from the bottom of the tail to the top, you're going to get more gold coverage because you're going with the grain of the scales. And then if you go from under the fin downward against the grain of the scales, as long as you don't have much paint on your brush, you're going to get less gold. And don't forget to paint the sides a little bit. If you want more of a rustic or vintage look, just use less gold like I did on this tail here. Okay, once the paint is dry, we're going to glue these two tails together. All you have to use is water. You just put a little water on each side, which will make it tacky. And again, let them dry at least overnight, again, depending on the humidity where you live. After it's completely dry, I gently paint the sides a little bit more, and I do a little retouching. Because that dust, once the alcohol dries, it kind of becomes dust again, and it can come off. Wearing gloves helps though. The gloves don't pick up as much dust as your hands. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot our little pearl. We're gonna wanna take a little bit of fondant, roll it into a ball, and then we're gonna spray it with pearl spray. And then let this dry. It won't take very long to dry. Yay, we've got all our little accessories done. All right, now just make your favorite buttercream. I'm using my Crusting cream cheese frosting for this cake. Cream cheese frosting doesn't usually hold its shape very well for decorating, but this Crusting buttercream tastes like your classic cream cheese frosting, which I adore. But it also holds its shape well. And the crusting part is nothing you can taste. It just means the very thin outer layer when exposed to air crusts over, which makes it really great for keeping its shape. And I have many flavor recipes on my channel of this Crusting buttercream. I'll put a link to these down below in my video description. So if your buttercream has a little bit of a yellow tint to it, it's going to make it a little harder to get the right color. All you have to do to get it white is to put just a teeniest bit of violet color in your buttercream. Make sure you take a little of spoonful out before you add the violet for comparison, because as soon as I see a difference in the color and brightness, I stop. Otherwise, you're going to end up with violet colored frosting. So now you're starting with a nice white color. So take a little bit of white out because you're going to put a little bit of white piping on top. And then take a little bit more white out and put it in a separate container. And you're going to put violet color in there. And actually you want it to turn light violet because again, we're going to put a little on top. And then you're going to color the rest of your frosting a light teal color. So I use the color teal and start with a very little bit. A little goes a long way. Make sure you're using the icing color though. It's like a thick gel. And I like to take an item that I want the color to be to help match it up, because it's kind of difficult to just picture the perfect color in your head. It's easier to have something to compare. If you're finding your buttercream to be a little more green than you were hoping for, this means you didn't get it white enough to start. That yellow still coming through, because yellow and blue make green. So if you're finding your blue too green, add purple. Sorry to confuse you. Lots of colors going on. Oh, and I forgot to mention also, the reason why purple makes your frosting more white is because yellow is the opposite end of purple on the color wheel, so the purple cancels the yellow out. And once you reach your desired color, take some of that light teal out, because we're going to be doing an ombre effect on our cake to replicate the look of the ocean, because the ocean is darker on the bottom than it is on the top. So we're gonna make our cake darker on the bottom than on the top. So just add more teal icing color to get a darker shade of the light teal. Okay, check your frosting and make sure that it's smoothing well with your angled spatula. There's not a lot of air bubbles. If it doesn't look right, go ahead and check out my How to Frost a Cake tutorial for some troubleshooting tips. And then we're gonna put the light teal and dark teal in a piping bag with tip number 2D. If you don't know how to use piping bags, check out my tutorial, How to Make a Cupcake Swirl. It'll take you through all the basics. But basically, you're gonna cut the tip of the bag off, put the piping tip in, and fill up your bag with frosting. Make sure you twist your bag real tight and squeeze only with your dominant hand. We're gonna start with a crumb-coated cake in the light teal color. If you don't know how to do this, go ahead and check out my How to Crumb Coat a Cake tutorial. So we're gonna use the same technique we would to stripe a cake. Take your piping bag with the dark teal buttercream inside, and we're going to go around the cake twice with this color. And then we're gonna go around the rest of the cake with the light teal. When you get to the top of the cake, this is a good time to practice your piping if you want. And then you're just gonna smooth this out. If you don't know how to smooth a cake, check out my How to Frost a Cake tutorial. You could also leave it frosted like this if you want, not even smooth it out. It's a cool wave kind of look. Now we actually want our two different colors to kind of blend together, so no need to be super careful when you're smoothing this out. Now mine's colors are looking too separate, so I'm going to take my angled spatula and just swipe it up so I kind of blend those colors together better, and then I'll smooth it out again. This will help make it look more gradual and blended. Don't worry about smoothing this out perfectly, because we're going to texture the cake now to give it a wave effect. I used a 13-inch spatula because I wanted thicker lines. I like to start at the top and just drag the tip of your spatula while turning the cake, and choose a back of your cake and start here. And this is where you'll gradually, every time you hit the back of the cake, you'll shift your angled spatula down a notch so you can make your way down the cake. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing at the top, except for we're starting in the center. As you spin the cake, all you're going to have to do with your angled spatula is pull it toward the outside of the cake. Notice the spatula is not going in a spiral at all. I am simply pulling it toward the straight back toward the outside of the cake. And careful not to get too close to the edge. We don't want to ruin our nice edges. And sorry about the wobbly video. All my countertops were full of desserts and I wasn't thinking, and did this on a table. All right, it's time for the final step. We're gonna pipe and place our accessories. We're gonna do a cool violet light teal swirl under the mermaid tail. To accomplish this, you're gonna wanna lay out some plastic wrap, put a dollop of light teal next to a dollop of violet, and try to make them the same size and shape. And then roll the colors up into a tube, cut off one end and place it into your piping bag. And we're going to use a 2D tip for this. And just pipe a little bit of the beginning until both the colors start coming out at the same time. So all you have to do is pipe a really big cupcake swirl right in the middle of your cake. And make sure you make it big enough so you can stick your mermaid tail in there and it'll hold it in there like glue. Put it in the refrigerator for a little bit to give the buttercream a little time to crust over so it really holds that tail in there well. And the cold just helps give it a little more time to be able to do that so the tail doesn't start to droop. Okay, now fill 3 piping bags with 6B tips in the white, light teal, and dark teal. And just place some dollops around the cake so that we can place our little sea life molds. I like using this tip with all the teeth because it kind of reminds me of anemones. And vary them in size for aesthetic appeal. And group them in odd numbers, which is also good for aesthetics. I think 3 on each side looks nice. And when piping these, just make sure you hold the bag just above the cake long enough to get a nice big base before you start pulling up and releasing pressure. And remember to completely stop pressure before you pull the bag away so you get that nice point on top. Okay, now you can start placing your accessories. We're gonna assemble our oyster here. So just set one end of the candy melt down upside down, and we're gonna use our buttercream as glue to put a little buttercream on the bottom of that pearl and stick it on the shell. And put a little buttercream on the flat side of the top of the shell. So then when you place it on top of the ball, it's glued. And the only other place you have to glue the molds on is when we put them in the front of the cake to just really make sure that they stick on there since gravity is going to be fighting them. So just put a little buttercream on the back and stick them on. And if some buttercream smushes out the sides, you can just wait for it to crust over and then use a toothpick or something to kind of scrape it off. And then you can add your molds wherever you want on the side and back of your cake. And then I sprinkled some fun sprinkles on top, and I also placed some sprinkles on the side to look like little bubbles in the water. A good technique for putting sprinkles on the side of your cake like this is to dip your finger in a little water and then dip it in the sprinkles and then push your finger against the cake and the sprinkles should stick into your cake so you don't accidentally nick up your cake. If you're liking this video, let me know by clicking the thumbs up button. If you'd like to learn more cake decorating skills, how to decorate other fun sweets, and all other types of baking stuff, start now by subscribing and clicking the bell so you receive notifications every time I post a new video. Yay, you did it! You decorated a mermaid cake. Please send me a picture. I love to see other people's creations. And thank you guys so much for watching. I cannot wait to see you next time.